On the 24th of November, 1963, 2 days after the President of the United States of America, John F. Kennedy, was assassinated in Dallas, Texas, the very man who had been accused of taking his life was shot dead in front of the world's television cameras. Lee Harvey Oswald's sudden death shocked the world as mobster Jack Ruby fired his weapon into him, and his death fueled a huge amount of conspiracy and speculation that is still debated to this day, over 50 years after Kennedy's death. It was also one of the most notorious moments in American history. However, in the years after Oswald's death, his grave was opened and his coffin was also opened, and his decaying and decomposing remains were disturbed and studied. But what was found was shocking and harrowing. But why was Oswald's grave opened? On the morning of November 24th, 1963, Lee Harvey Oswald was scheduled to be transferred from Dallas City Jail to the Dallas County Jail, a move meant to place him in a more secure facility. Oswald had been arrested 2 days earlier for the murder of President John F. Kennedy, whose assassination in Dealey Plaza had shocked the entire world. He was also accused of killing Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit, who confronted him roughly 45 minutes after the presidential shooting. Oswald consistently denied all charges. During press appearances whilst in police custody, he told reporters, "I'm just a patsy." In the tense hours that followed Kennedy's death, footage showed Oswald appearing calm but bewildered, surrounded by police and journalists pushing microphones into his face. Everyone expected a public trial that would finally determine his guilt or innocence. Instead, Oswald never lived long enough to speak in court. As preparations were made for his transfer, the atmosphere inside the Dallas police headquarters was chaotic. The building teemed with officers, federal agents, cities of officials, and members of the press. Unlike modern high-security prisoner movements, access to the basement garage was loosely controlled. Reporters and camera crews were allowed inside to witness what was intended to be a routine transfer. Security checks were uneven. Anyone wearing a press badge or simply appearing legitimate could move freely around much of the building, and shortly after 11:20 a.m., Oswald was brought down an elevator to the police basement, handcuffed to Detective Jim Lavelle and flanked by Detective L.C. Graves. As TV cameras broadcast live, Oswald walked forward, squinting beneath the bright lighting. A moment later, a man stepped from the waiting crowd. That man was Jack Ruby, a 52-year-old Dallas nightclub owner with known ties to the local police community. Ruby had been a familiar figure around police headquarters in the days after Kennedy's assassination, and after bringing sandwiches or coffee to officers and mingling freely inside of restricted areas. As Oswald moved forward, Ruby lunged and fired a single shot from a .38 caliber revolver at point-blank range, striking Oswald in the abdomen. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the basement. Witnesses later described confusion and shouting as officers pinned Ruby to the ground. On camera, viewers saw Oswald collapse, grimacing in pain and immediately clutching his stomach. Detective Lavelle was heard shouting, "Jack, you son of a bitch," as officers disarmed and arrested Ruby. Paramedics rushed Oswald to Parkland Memorial Hospital, the same hospital where President Kennedy had been pronounced dead just 2 days earlier. Surgeons operated urgently, but the damage was catastrophic. Ruby's bullet had perforated several major organs and blood vessels, causing massive internal bleeding. After more than an hour of emergency surgery, Lee Harvey Oswald was pronounced dead at 1:07 p.m. on November 24th, 1963. He was 24 years old. With Oswald's death, the chief suspect in Kennedy's murder was silenced forever. There would be no courtroom cross-examination, no sworn testimony, no opportunity for a definitive legal ruling on his guilt. Instead, his killing deepened mystery and fueled suspicion. Many Americans immediately asked how a man could walk into a police station basement and shoot the most notorious suspect in modern history on live television. Jack Ruby was charged with Oswald's murder and put on trial in 1964. Prosecutors argued that the killing was premeditated, pointing to Ruby's gun purchase and his movements that morning. Ruby insisted he acted spontaneously, claiming he was overwhelmed by grief over Kennedy's death and wanted to spare Jacqueline Kennedy the ordeal of returning to Dallas for a trial. The jury rejected Ruby's explanation. He was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. However, the verdict was later overturned on appeal because of errors in the trial proceedings, and Ruby was granted a new trial. And before that trial could begin, Ruby died in the January of 1967 from complications related to lung cancer. Like Oswald, Ruby never completed the legal process that might have clarified his motives under oath. The death of Lee Harvey Oswald effectively ensured that questions surrounding Kennedy's assassination would linger unsolved, though official investigations, most notably the Warren Commission, concluded that Oswald acted alone and Ruby also acted alone. Public skepticism never vanished. Oswald's murder became central to countless conspiracy theories, some claiming that Ruby was part of a broader plot to silence Oswald before he could talk. Now, after the assassination of Lee Harvey Oswald, there was a degree of conspiracy about the fact that some believed that it may not have been he who was buried inside of a grave carrying his name. These rumours about a possible imposter or double reached government ears, and the authorities then decided to try and shoot down this once and for all. And the only way to do this was to open up his grave, his burial vault and coffin, and confirm that his body was inside. Lee Harvey Oswald's wife was consulted, and she allowed the authorities to open his grave. On the 4th of October 1981, inside of Rose Hill Cemetery, grave diggers began to break into the grave, and they quickly discovered the vault, which was made of concrete, had become damaged. There were cracks in the side and water had seeped in over the years. This led to the lid of the casket caving in partially, meaning the remains and corpse of Lee Harvey Oswald was exposed to the air and visible. The coffin was removed from the vault. The body was transported to a medical centre in Dallas for examination. During this, it was discovered the corpse of Lee Harvey Oswald was in a very advanced stage of decomposition caused by damage to the vault. They examined only really the head and the skull of Oswald, and they also compared his teeth to earlier taken dental x-rays, and they did confirm that Oswald was in the grave. They also looked at certain markings on his face, and they matched the teeth too. There was also a scar on the left side of his face, which was noticeable, and it was then announced by the officers that "We have concluded beyond any doubt, and I mean beyond any doubt, that the individual buried under the name Lee Harvey Oswald in Rose Hill Cemetery is in fact Lee Harvey Oswald." But some people were not convinced that the body was still Oswald, and it was claimed that a craniotomy then also occurred, and that his brain during this after death had been removed and weighed. Photographs were published later showing parts of Oswald which were rotting, but from an official point of view, the exhumation of Kennedy's killer confirmed it was in fact Oswald inside of the grave, despite the huge number of unanswered questions that many still have today, decades after the assassination of JFK. Thank you for watching, and to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. And once again, thank you so much for watching.